you have different people that play different roles. And I think where performance and mental performance comes into play is it's something that a lot of people are becoming accustomed because it's out in the open now and people are talking about it. And you win an NBA championship or college, or you have a merger or successful business, and people talk about, oh, I was working with a physio, or I had a performance coach, or I've had an executive coach. And what that's putting in the limelight is that some of the most successful people, even though they're dominant in their field, their endeavor, they have coaches that are behind the scenes helping them with one specific tactic, or helping them, how do they reset, how do they recharge. And I think the value in coaching, and especially in performance and mental performance, is that it's just like a muscle, right? So if you're wanting to get your biceps or your shoulders stronger, you're going to work with a trainer or purchase a program online that works on that specific thing. If you're running a marathon, let's say in 6 months from now, you're not going to go out and just start running just a mile here, a mile there. You're going to either purchase a program, buy a book, get a podcast, hire a coach, and they're going to walk you through, okay, on Monday you do this.
Welcome to the Sharpen the Spear podcast, where we help home service pros cut through the noise, sharpen their business tools, and reclaim the profit, freedom, and impact they've been missing. I'm your host, Richard Walsh, Profit Freedom Coach, and I'm here to help you stop grinding and start growing. Let's sharpen the spear. And we are back on STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast, with another incredible guest. Christopher Wirth is with us. And Christopher, no one knows Christopher better than Christopher. So Christopher, give us the backstory, bring us up to speed, and we are going to have an amazing conversation.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's a blast when I get to have somebody on my show and then kind of flip the script, flip the mic. So appreciate the opportunity. You were a phenomenal guest on my show. So I guess just to be real simple, I am a podcaster, an author, a speaker, a coach. I played college basketball and tennis. I coached college basketball for a while, and now I work as a mental performance coach. I get the opportunity to work with some incredible college teams, both men and women's, all different sports, work with some phenomenal entrepreneurs. And I just love what I get to do every single day. And I have 3 kids. I used to say 3 young kids. They are not as young anymore. And I'm trying to say young so I can kind of trick people into not realizing that I'm in my mid 40s now, but love what I do and love getting an opportunity to connect with people like you. And just thanks for the opportunity to be on your incredible show.
Absolutely, Christopher. Yeah, it's a great thing. I do that too with my kids because they're all upper teens, 20. I'm like, yeah, those days are gone. So I just say I have 6 children. Very, not even basically not no varying age. They're about 3.5 years apart from each other. So it's just like whatever. Yeah, upper teens. That's what I just tell them. 22 19s to 18s and 17. There you go. So it's easy. But yeah, it's crazy when they grow. It's great. They grow, they leave, they go in the Marine Corps, they do whatever they do, and it's really cool. So I'm sure your kids are on those trajectories in some fashion, which is great. So let's talk about a little bit on the performance end. Let's just kind of kick that off. I know I've trained a lot of athletes myself. I've done a lot of different things in the performance category. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite things to do. Train my son, everything from Junior Olympics to boxing to preparing for the Marine Corps. I've trained a lot of guys getting ready for the military, physically and everything else and mentally. So I love the topic, and I'd like to get some of your insights, because you all got away, right? Like, and you know the saying, every coach isn't for every athlete.
Nope.
Okay. So it's like, and one thing real quick, I'll turn it back over to you, but people like, I'm not a sports guy actually, right? So I don't watch any sports. I don't do any of that. I don't have time. I never have. It's no big deal. I do them. I train people in them, okay, but I don't like watch them, okay, as like entertainment. So, but you hear people talking, they'll be just smack talking about this, NFL coach. He's this and this. Of course they know better, and they're doing their whole thing about this terrible coach. He's awful, and the team fires him, and he goes to another team, and 2 years later he's in the Super Bowl. Okay, I'm like, well, someone explain that. I don't hear you talking about that. What was that all about? You know what I mean? I think we know what it is, right? We get it. They're not gelling with that team. There's no synergy there, man. There's no alignment or something. But kind of like, what's your experience in that kind of stuff? Because man, you're working with high level athletes, so there's got to be some stories.
That's that's an interesting point you make. The famous basketball player Larry Bird, he got into coaching. He was also in management. He was one of the greatest basketball players of all time with the Boston
Mm-hmm.
Celtics. Won,
Mm-hmm.
I think, four NBA championships. But when he was the head coach for a short period with the Indiana Pacers, and they had success, I remember listening to him on an interview they had on NBC Sports before one of the playoff games, and he was talking about the idea that coaches have a runway. And I didn't fully grasp it at the time, but going back to your point about, every coach is not for every athlete, every teammate is not for every athlete, every, husband is not for every wife, friendship, business, all those things. But what I feel, and I believe in the performance side, whether it's mental performance, whether it's another type of performance coaching, or just coaching in general, is that people think this idea you have to have a coach forever or the same coach. And the analogy I give all the time is, if you look at professional athletes and you pick the sport, let's just say tennis, for example, you're not going to hire the same accountant that's going to work on your serve. And you're not going to hire the same chef that's also going to be your hitting partner when you're out traveling throughout the world. You have different people that play different roles. And I think where performance and mental performance comes into play is, it's something that a lot of people are becoming accustomed, because it's out in the open now and people are talking about it. And you win an NBA championship or college, or you have a merger or successful business, and people talk about, oh, I was working with a physio, or I had a performance coach, or I've had an executive coach. And what that's putting in the limelight is that some of the most successful people, even though they're dominant in their field, their endeavor, they have coaches that are behind the scenes helping them with one specific tactic, or helping them, how do they reset, how do they recharge. And I think the value in coaching, and especially in performance and mental performance, is that it's just like a muscle, right? So if you're wanting to get your biceps or your shoulders stronger, you're going to work with a trainer or purchase a program online that works on that specific thing. If you're running a marathon, let's say in 6 months from now, you're not going to go out and just start running just a mile here, a mile there. You're going to either purchase a program, buy a book, get a podcast, hire a coach, and they're going to walk you through, okay, on Monday you do this, on Tuesday you do this, on Wednesday you rest, on Thursday you do this. And it's the same thing for those people, those teams, those corporations, individuals that want to get better. And going back to my point, is it's a muscle. And if you're not working it, practicing it, it'll get better because you're working on different things. But if you really want to get to that next level, regardless of what it is, I think that your mindset and the things that you're doing and you control have a huge impact. But 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't think the word coach or mentor was used the same way. But I think the other perspective I have, and I don't think we touched on this, but the word life coach, I really have a problem with that title.
Yes.
If somebody introduces me, I'm never going to embarrass somebody or put them on the spot. But, after a podcast or interview, I'll just say, hey, just to give you a heads up, Richard, you had mentioned that, I'm a life coach. I don't use that term, and people say, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, no, I said, you don't need to apologize in any way. I said, but how can I coach you on life? Because that would mean that I'm better at life than you. And I always say, if you can't do your bookkeeping, you're going to go out and hire a phenomenal bookkeeper or an accountant to do that. You're not going to, again, go out and hire somebody that's terrible, or like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll try to do it. So you're always going to look to level up. But I just wanted to be clear that, I don't ever use that term. And I know a lot of people do, and that's totally fine. And there are specific certifications, but I always jokingly say that, I'm not an expert in life. You could ask my ex-wife in that regard. But I just wanted to touch on that because it is one of those humorous titles that people use a lot, which is fine. If they want to, that's their choice.
Yeah, Chris, I'm with you, dude. Now I'll throw them under the bus all day. I don't care. Okay, I mean, when someone says life coach, I'm just, when there's that one trigger that shuts you down completely, whatever that might be in your life, that's one of them. I just I'm gonna call it's my podcast. I'm gonna say whatever I want, dude. It's like you have I have no respect for you because you haven't defined anything. Life coach. I mean, it's ridiculous. Okay, like because there's nothing life. I'm going on 60 years. You're 30. You're a life coach. What possibly? Like, dude, I've done more. I've forgotten more than you know. Okay, it's like I'm just saying. Like, I look at it. It's like it's this. I know this is terrible. I'm like, it's just this kind of limp-wristed, weak sauce. I'm gonna help everybody. I'll make them feel good. Okay, I tell you what, any good coach probably doesn't make you feel good
No.
during the coaching. Okay. You'll be incredibly grateful. Okay. Down the road. Okay. My son, anyone else I work with, like, dude, you're the best coach I ever had, man. It sucked during it. Like, you just punish me. Right. That kind of thing. It's
I'll interject for 1 second just because I read a lot of books, and Bill Belichick just wrote, or a couple months ago, it came out when I was actually working with one of my college teams, and I was actually at the Big East tournament with one of my teams down in Philadelphia, and we had some time before practice, and there was a bookstore about 5-minute ride from the hotel, and I had my car down there, so I was just driving around, and I purchased Bill Belichick's new book, and I'm a big fan of people that always level up, and going back to, and I think this comes full circle, is you don't need to be best friends with your coach, all your teammates. You don't need to be best friends with your teachers and things like that. There should be either a level of respect for them as a person or a level of respect for what they do. And I think you need at least one of those two. A lot of the times you'll get both of them, but you need at least two of them, or excuse me, one of them to have a really strong relationship. And the reason I use Bill Belichick is Bill Belichick was very difficult to play for and to coach alongside. Not from my experience. I've never had the privilege of working with him, but from other players and from other coaches. But the one thing that those former coaches that worked with him or players that played for him will say is, yes, he was tough, or, he was difficult, or his press conferences were notorious where he would just, be very black and white with answers. But he really wanted the best out of his players, out of his teams, out of his fellow coaches, and he worked his tail off. So for me, it goes back to something you said originally, which is, you don't have to, be best friends with everybody. You don't have to love your coach. And a lot of times you don't during the time, but it's a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road where you look back and be like, wow, Richard was really tough on me. He was a stickler for the details. And during it, I didn't really maybe love it or appreciate it. But now 5, 10 years later, I'm realizing that that's the exact coach I needed. And one thing to add, and I say this all the time to not only my clients, but if you were talking to me about potentially working with me, and maybe you were talking to somebody else as well, I found that a lot of my quote unquote competition will, I don't want to say knock the competition per se, but they'll be like, oh, well, Richard does this and I do this better. And I realized early on that my strongest selling point was to differentiate myself without comparing. So, for example, I would say, I'm not familiar with Richard's style. I have not worked with him, but if you, feel you'd like to speak to both of us, please go ahead. If you want to set up a follow-up conversation with me, I want to make sure it's a good fit, but you need to make sure that you're okay with this decision as well. And I don't think enough people do that in today's day and age. They find a coach, they find a product, and it's like, okay, I'm in. And sometimes obviously it works great, but I think I always suggest make an extra phone call, do a little bit of research, unless somebody's giving you a timeline, like, hey, like my spots are filling up, which, as you know, it does happen, especially with events and things. But barring something needing to be done right this second, I always say if it's the right decision, waiting a couple hours or one day is never going to be the wrong thing. But on the flip side is, just making that rash decision. And if you don't really go through it, it could be a very costly, both financially, but also with your time.
Yeah, and your achievement. Like you don't get a coach just to have a. It's not rent a friend. I mean, it's like we got goals, we got results to produce. Okay, like that's I'm a results guy. That's just what I'm about. I focus on that. I'm very direct, right? So, and again, it doesn't mean you have to. Like I always tell people, like I'm a big fan of negative reinforcement. Most people are not. Okay. Like if you go in the Marine Corps, like I did, you're going to learn to embrace negative reinforcement. Okay. They're going to talk smack. They're going to beat you down. Like I only thrive in that position, right? In that environment. I'm good at it. And I can serve that up really easy. Now I can tether myself. I don't just go that because it is a small group that responds to that. Right. But if you do respond to negative reinforcement, man, you can do some great things fast. And from the outside, it's ugly.
Let me challenge you for 1 second. So I'm curious to get this is the podcaster in me. I can't,
I love it. I love it.
So I don't disagree with that, perspective. And my family is, we have a lot of military in our family, so I understand both sides of it. But I think the one thing that people miss is when you say negative reinforcement or constructive criticism, there's ways in which you deliver that message. And right. I believe that there's times where you need to hold the client's hand if they're going through a difficult situation and you need to help guide them. I believe there's times you need to push that client ahead, just like back in the military where, maybe you're, running really slow and you got to, finish fast or else your whole unit's going to start again. But it's finding that mix between it. And I think the most successful coaches, forget our area, but all areas of coaches from Little League baseball up through professional athletes or military is you have to find the balance of when you need to be tough, when you need to be a friend, when you need to sometimes listen a little bit more, and sometimes you need to maybe explain or re-explain something. But then going back to what you said before, it's a results game. So you need to hold hands, sometimes listen, you need to push, you need to pull. But then at the end of the day, I always say the best future is going to be the one where results are produced. And if you don't get the results that you were looking for, then maybe you make an adjustment. But I just had to touch on that because I think it's a powerful perspective that I think when you look at coaching, it's like back to that life piece. It's like, no, coach is not just there to pat you on the back the whole time. Because you're never going to get out of your comfort zone, but you also can't just drill somebody down and be a Bobby Knight type. Because at the end of the day, there's got to be time where, look, you can't put the pedal on the car all the time because eventually you're going to crash into something.
Yeah, no, well articulated. You're exactly right. You can't, I don't. It's not like I'm just a guy walking around with a riding crop, smacking people. You know what I mean? Though I did have one of those during my workouts. It worked well, but you're exactly right. I mean, because it's all, to me, everything, what I've learned over time is everything is relationship. Okay. And when and relationship is not one way or the highway. All right. There is give and take, but it's also, like you said all the right points, right? So it's listening, it's understanding where they're at in the journey. You got to know when to push them. Right. There's that, like, you're wearing no quit, right? You got to know when it's like you have to enforce that right now, because if you let them quit at this point, there may be no coming back from that. Right. So you have to understand that. And it doesn't mean it's life or death. What it means is, and I remember doing it with my son, we were prepping for the Corps. We're doing like 40-yard bear calls, right? Back and forth. So you do a 40-yard bear crawl, you do 10 burpees, you do 40, we do that 10 times, right? And you get going. This is the finisher of the workout. So we've already worked out and he's doing those and I see him and going, and this is just innately with him or whatever, but he'll stop and you'll see the arms quivering and he'll pick one up. If bear crawl people know what it is, you're on your hands and feet, right? And you're crawling like a bear. And he'll just shake it out, but you'll see him just, in his mind, he's just not going to quit. You know what I mean? He may be stuck there for a minute, then he goes, and I'm ready. Okay, I'm ready to like make sure he doesn't, but I never had to say it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you have to know, like, I didn't need to encourage him. I just had to let him sit in that position where he's shaking. Because just again is a technique, I guess, but you have to know when you need to speak or you need to let them do it, because if he can get through it mentally, he's tough as nails now, you know what I mean? But it's just in him. So you're exactly right, man. That's the beauty of coaching, though. That's why again, you said it, I've said it, I'll say it again. The life coach thing is too ambiguous, right? It's not like there's too much going on here just in a performance aspect. I mean, I just spent 2 minutes talking about a bear crawl. Okay.
And I think a life coach too is going back to the example I gave you about a professional tennis player or an athlete or what have you, is, to me, the life coach term is just, it's so broad. And not that you should be, I mean, you could be a coach for like a left-handed pitcher at the age of 26, but the reality is,
right.
when you do what you do well, you can fit into different categories at different times. But I always, just going back to it, it's always interesting because I'm like, well, do you have an expertise? Do you have an area where it's like, well, I have a broad practice, which is fine, because there are some things like a generalist for law practice, a generalist for a doctor that, you want to get, but you're not going to, I don't think you're going to go to, just your regular doctor to actually operate on your heart. Now, maybe if that's the only choice and you're about to die, then you take the chance. But the reality is, if you have a specific area that needs help or needs surgery or guidance, and it's the same thing with coaching. It's the same thing with mentorship. It's the same thing if you're in a business and you want to get to a certain level. You're not going to ask the accountant to spend 4 days with him or her if you're looking to become the next CEO or the next head of marketing, right? You're going to spend time specifically in that area and say, can I shadow you? So I think it's important to know where you're going, but going back to what we said before, is at different times in life, you need different things, which is why I believe you need different coaches, and why I believe that, not that you can't, I want to be clear on that, but I don't think it's always the best thing to have one coach for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, because they have certain expertise. And I know people, and I'm sure you do as well, where they've come back to different coaches at different times, or they've gone to specific coaches to do specific things, but it's not about one way where it's set it and forget it.
Yeah, it really, and there's the time, if you've been doing it long enough, like you and I, when you're going to send your client to another coach, it's like, it's time.
Yeah.
I'm done. I've done what I do, and you need the expertise of this. And I use a simple example, go back to sport. Okay. When you're in college, you don't have an 8th grade coach. Okay. When you're in middle school, you got that coach. When you're in your Pop Warner, whatever, you got that coach. When you're in high school, you got a different coach, and you go to the next level, because that's their realm, right? That's what they do. That's where they're at. It's not one coach for everything. Same principle. Business, same thing. I may be coaching someone, and I'll say, well, listen, you need a fractional CFO. We got to bring a CFO in this. You're not ready for a full-time, but a fractional guy, let's bring him in. I want you to work with him as well. Right. And we bring the needs, we find out significant need. Like, yeah, I'm not touching that. I'm the last person you want to do that. Right. Like, but this guy, I got the guy. Bring him in and there you go. Same thing with specialized accounting and tax prep and tax strategy. I got guys who specialize in construction. Most of my guys, okay, boom, talk to this guy. Bring this guy in. He understands the entire industry, right? I don't want to be all things, So, and it's just, and now you create this team. Come on, man. I know I don't watch a lot of football. Football, you got how many coaches? You got everything, right? You got trainers, you got defense, offense, whatever, pass. They got everything, right? Because you got to have that. Okay. You need those levels of expertise. They're going to drill into certain things, because these guys at that level, probably a lot of levels you're working at too, Christopher, is they're looking for incremental improvement. When you're at those high levels, man, you're not making he's a whole different guy. No, he ran the shuttle like a fraction of a second faster. I mean, that can be a difference between a win or loss. I mean, is that kind of stuff. People don't really get that ultra high level of performance. Like, you can be really great, but you're not really, really great, because you're up there and you can't get that last 100th. Right. And it's that kind of thing.
No, I love that. And you know, it's interesting when you say, not you, but in general, when someone says performance or mental performance when it comes to coaching, the default always is like, oh, so you only work with athletes or professional athletes. And
Right.
going back to that life coach analogy, I always smile because I say, well, hold on a second. Let's dissect what performance means. So what do you mean? I said, okay, so you are one of the top three salesmen or saleswomen in your company. So you are performing as a salesperson. You are performing as a CEO. You are performing as head of marketing. You are performing as fill in the blank. So it's an interesting concept because a lot of times people say, oh, well, I'm probably too low for you, or I'm probably not quote unquote big enough. And I always say it's not about the size, it's about what you're looking to do. And I want to be clear, some people don't want to get to that next one, two, three, or four levels, which is fine. I can never say what someone needs to or should do. I can give obviously my input as you can, but that goes along with that why everybody doesn't have a coach. And that's why, you talk about bringing in a fractional CFO, or you bring in somebody who is going to work with your company or work with you specifically for 10 hours a week, for 5 hours a month. And people say, well, what does that mean? And it goes back to being very specific to what am I looking to achieve? So if I run a business and it's just me and I don't have the money to bring in a CFO, head of HR, head of marketing, and all those different areas, you then take it one step back and say, okay, that's ideal. That's utopia where I want to have, $1 million sitting in the bank and I could pay 20 here, 50 there. You then say, okay, from a fractional perspective or an hourly or a specific amount of time per month, what could I afford? And then how does this help me? And that's to me the foundation of what coaching is how is this person or this program, or can this person or this program help me get from, let's say, making $50,000 a year in sales to the next big jump, which is 100, right? And use that example. If you were my coach and I went from 50 to 100,000, and that's kind of really your expertise of taking that big jump, which it is a very big jump.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next 2, 3, 4 years, I'm at 100, 101, 102, 104. It doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job. You literally doubled my income, but maybe that's your sweet spot. So then it's like you maybe introduce me to someone else, say, hey, Chris, I've worked with this gentleman or this woman. Their sweet spot really is going from 100 to 250 to 500, and we refer clients back and forth. But you also have to have that less of an ego where you realize that maybe,
Right.
So it's just, again, it's a little bit repetitive, but it's so powerful when you connect with people that understand growth and understand what it really takes. And again, I want to be clear. I don't want anybody to take the concept, that idea that wherever you are now is not enough, because some people get to certain levels and that's where they want to really operate, and that's fine. But some people are continually leveling up, and that's fine as well.
Well, I think that the beauty of this is you have to have this level of self-confidence, okay, in what you do. It can't be, like, and you just gave the example. If I am the 50 to 100 guy, okay, cool. You're the 100 to 250 to 500, great. What I want to do, if I'm confident, I know who I'm serving and helping. I want you on the speed dial. I'm gonna get my guy to 100. Okay, here's who you're talking to next, and hand them off. Because my ultimate goal, what gives me joy, is others' success, their results. Right? I want to see them like do it, be better than me, do all this stuff. I want to see when I work in business, I want to see the owners freed from their business. I want them to be able to actually spend time with their family, right? I want them to have high profit. I want them to have real freedom. I want them to make real impact. That's where I get my joy. It's not continuing to get a check, right? It's like, what do you need to get to that point, whatever that is, right? And beyond, wherever you want to go, as you said, okay, it's up to them. I can't make anyone, be successful. But if they want to, they're coachable. Man, look out. But I also know when it's time to hand them off. And I think that's a thing in a coach. Like that's when they have a incredible self-awareness, right? Which is also a real great entrepreneurial trait. So when you're in business as a coach, when you find that sweet spot, as you said, and understand others, you actually talk to other coaches. You don't create a little island. I'm the great coach and no one may talk to me. You know what I mean? You go find out what you're doing. I have you on here, find out what you're doing. Right? That's what we do. So people go, Rich would be good for this and Chris would be good. Oh, that's kind of cool. So now they have, what I want, Christopher, is vetted referrals. Right? Like well, go find a performance coach. Well, that doesn't help anyone. I said, talk to these two guys. Talk to these three. These are guys I've worked with. I know what they do. I know how they do it. Like you'll fit in here somewhere, but go do the interviews. Right? That's kind of how I look at it.
No, and I think it's important, and it's the ego perspective too, where you fit in with other coaches, and I like that, because the reality is you might not stay somewhere forever, but if you are building your network, then the hope is that those people are going to be thinking of you as well, and might be able to say, hey, you know what, I think Richard might be a better fit right now. Why don't you speak to him? And of course, you want to have all the business, you can, as most people want, but there's also the right business versus the right now business, and that's sometimes trickier than it's comes across.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little example in the construction industry, right? You got guys who build high-end, super custom homes, $3, $5, $10 million homes, $15 million, and you got guys who are hovering at 750, right? And they're great at it. Okay, the guys doing the high end don't touch those, but they really would like to have a great referral for people to ask them, because they're builders and people don't know the difference, right? They don't get high, low, like, no, here's the guy who does that specifically. That's a sweet spot. 500 to 1.5 million. That's your guy. He's going to do that for you and do it well. And again, and the other guy said, well, dude, you're looking for a $5 million house. I'm not building that. Okay. That's not you go to this guy, talk to him. I know him. He does phenomenal work, right? The same principle, right? That's why it's not just this performance thing or whatever, or sports or performance, that it's like all aspects of business is the same principle, right? Everyone's got their zone of genius, if you will, right? And we operate in that, and that's good to know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, really good stuff. So let's kind of go down this road. We talked a lot about, we kind of get the performance, right? We understand where we're taking people on all the different levels and everything else. Let's kind of swerve into, as a business. Okay, let's kind of go to the business side a little bit on this too, because it is a business podcast. So we're going to hit some more business stuff, So let's talk. We might have guys, we might have coaches listen to us. People who do this, or they're doing both. A lot of people are like me. I've been an entrepreneur for 35 years. I've done multiple businesses. I've owned construction companies and gyms and the whole thing, right? So they might be here going, well, a lot of guys are thinking they've done this for 15, 20 years. Maybe I should be a coach. Maybe or they're mentoring at this time. That's the free part, where you don't get paid. You're just helping people out of the goodness of your own heart, but they want to make that step into coaching. Right. So I don't know specifically what your whole trajectory was, but maybe we can like piece together what that might look like for people who want to kind of, start going that direction. You know what I mean? I think we could have some fun with this.
No, that's a good question, and a great segue into something that I'm very passionate about, because I think the idea is you want to get compensated for your time, whether that's with potential referrals, introductions, financially. But the reality is, until that happens, you have to spend, in essence, your what I call sweat equity and paying it forward. But what I think people miss is, and I want to be very clear for your audience and anybody listening to this maybe for the first time as well, is having that goal or desire is the first and the most important step. Zig Ziglar famously spoke about, you can't hit a target you don't have. And if you don't have a target, how do you know where you're going? So if there's someone listening that wants to make that transition, whether that's full-time, part-time, into coaching and mentoring, that's the first step. the want, the desire, the objective. Then it's okay, utopia. Then how do I get my first client? How do I get my second client? And I think the willingness and the want to do that is paramount to anything. But then the next step after that is, how did I get my first coach? So I always ask people to retrace their steps. So if you were my first coach ever, let's say 10 years ago, I hired you, and now it's 10 years, and whether we still know each other or not, as I'm looking to make that transition, my suggestion to the audience is, well, think back about how you found your coach. Did they find you? Did somebody introduce you? And then say, okay, that was a really good relationship because that person that introduced us knew that you could help me in this area. So that's a big component. And then the other perspective I think that people miss sometimes is dialing down, meaning what is my ideal avatar? Now, I'm not a big believer in having an avatar that is so specific that it fits on like 5 pages, and all of a sudden you're like, well, this person or this company only fits 86 out of the 89 specific, so I can't work with them. But the trade-off to that is I think a lot of people want a coach or mentor, and it's like, well, I just got to get clients and I got to start working, and I've picked up some clients that we ended up parting ways. And my point to that is you want to be specific, but not too specific to the point where you are not working with people. But then really dial it down, take it one step further is, how can I really help Richard? He wants to take his business from 200 to 500, or he wants to take his business with 2 part-time employees to bring those 2 people on full-time, and then he wants to bring on 2 additional part-time. So then it's like, okay, let me help you with the structure. Let me help you with the pay scale where you figure, okay, after month 3 or month 4, I can transition from this person going part-time to full-time. But it's having a plan, and then executing on that plan. And one of the things that I'll put out there, and I'm not sure, maybe it's of interest to some of the listeners, but there are coaches out there that do work and specialize with helping to grow that starting business from a coaching perspective. It's not an area of my expertise, but I know a bunch of people that operate in that lane and will help you get your first, second, third, fourth, fifth client, because that's an area that they excel in. Now, the flip side or the other side of that coin is that there are people that take your business from 6 figures to 7 figures, and that's a huge jump. So it's finding the right place. But I think wanting to help, wanting to coach, wanting to mentor is huge, and then figuring out how you can do it and then who I can help is really important. And I think you need to kind of operate in those 3 different buckets, because it's really important to know specifically how you're going to get there, but then ideally who you want to help along the way.
Yeah, that's really good, Christopher, because I do the same thing. You really have to manage your expectations. Okay. And I always start with this with them. I go, the average online coach, they average about 40 grand a year. Okay. That's the stats. I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying, like, so you need to manage your expectations. Okay. And they probably just done it themselves. Okay. Like they just went out and figured and got a couple of clients. They haven't engaged in coaching, getting the coach for that. Like you said, there are guys who are specialists in taking you coach as a coach and creating the business. They show you how to get clients, where to get clients, right? Do group training, do singles, do one-on-ones, the whole thing, right? There's all these packages you can learn, but I think it's important to manage those expectations. And then, like you said, if you back up a little bit, you got to be given your best. Everyone's worried they're going to, I mean, if you're a one-trick pony, well, don't be a coach. Okay. If you got only one thing you're good at, like, you ain't a coach. Okay. Don't be afraid. If I tell them how to do this, I'll never get anyone. I mean, have you looked at YouTube ever? Okay. How many people you can do anything you want? You can see it, right? So I had this thing back in the day. I remember this is, oh man, 25, 30 years ago. I'm this great water feature builder. I can do all this incredible stuff. And I'm in Home Depot and I'm looking at these books, these how-to books. I'm like, I remember I'm going, well, why would they want to like show what they do? Like, it's like giving away their trade secrets, right? They're showing all this stuff. And that only lasts about 10 seconds in my mind. Then I realize, well, because as I know from talking, giving estimates. You got your do-it-yourselfers. They will never hire anybody. Okay, that's who the book's for. Okay, they're never going to hire you, but it's an authority builder. I'm so good, I can teach others. I'm so good, I write books. I have books. I wrote Escape the Owner Prison. I have best-selling books because what? Why? And I'm helping other businesses. I'm giving away secrets. I don't care. You can do them or not doing. My always thing was always like, if you can do it better, if I can help you be better or get close to where I'm operating at, guess what? You're the competition I want to be against.
Yeah.
Because we're apples to apples, man. We're charging the same thing. We're not battling on price, man. We're battling on expertise and quality, the real things that matter, right? Delivering value. So it's kind of cool when you look at that, but swinging it back, it's just, you got to have content out there, right? You got to be showing people like, I do this. I don't care, LinkedIn, wherever your audience might be, you got to be on these platforms and showing that you can do something. That's where you begin. Like, before you'd hire or do anything, it's like, well, what have you produced? You've done business. You're really good at that. Who have you mentored? Because you're mentored, these lunches you have with someone, you share an hour with them. I do that all the time. Still, with startups and stuff, like, what do they say? Like, get a testimonial, build it up, do a case study on that, stuff like that. So there's a lot of great ways to enter in it. The problem, and you mentioned this is not an overnight thing. You're not going to be the coach next week. Okay. You're not going to be hired by the best of the best next week. Okay. This is all time in the game. Just like if you start another business, that's what this is. And it's a process.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing. And I talk about this a lot on my podcast, is today's day and age with technology and social media. And you mentioned YouTube, you can literally go onto YouTube or Google any topic, and you can find multiple courses, programs, podcasts, and so many of them are free. But the one, I think, negative with social media is we see everybody else's year 2, 5, 10, or 30th, 40th, 50th client. And not that everybody should, have a 700 posts or things from day one, but I always strongly suggest find a mentor or mentors that, you look up to, that you want to emulate. They're not, be like them or just mimic everything, but be like them in the sense of maybe an industry or area expertise. But then what you can never, ever, ever do, because you'll lose every single time, is compare your day one, your week one, your month one versus somebody's, year 10. And I think that's one of the things that, and it has nothing to do with this generation coming up. It has to do with 2025 and where we are with technology and where we're going. But if anybody takes anything from the show, hopefully they took some stuff. But the idea that you can get information within seconds, you have to ultimately apply it and take action. But then, please do not compare yourself or look at somebody's current point or place in their career and say, oh, well, how come I'm not there? Because if you're going to do that, which people will often do, is I would say look at their trajectory. Because if it's somebody's, current place and they've only been doing it for a year, then obviously they're good at it. I would say, if you're comparing that, say, okay, well, who did they hire or who have they worked with as a coach? So the idea that success leaves clues is something that we all talk about. And I know the concept, but I always say, okay, what does that mean though? Right. So success leaves clues. So you have a roadmap in front of you, right? You have the most accurate navigation system in your vehicle. You still have to put the car or truck in drive and follow that, because it's not going to take you there itself. I know Elon Musk is working on these machines that you just wake up and, think about something and you'll be there. But until that happens, you have to drive yourself there, take a plane, take a, bus, train, whatever it is. But I think so many people miss that idea. And I believe anybody and everybody can be successful, but I do not believe anybody can or will ever be hugely successful right overnight. It's just not the way success happens.
Yeah, I agree. There's a great saying I learned years ago, and it's, people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and significantly underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. right? They just don't get the time factor. Okay. Now I understand if you're like 17, because you've lived 17 years, you don't know Jack. Okay. And your comparison of time, it's
Sure.
like I remember 17, you go in the Marine Corps and it's 4 years, it's a lifetime. Okay. It's like this is an eternity, so and now I look at it and go, that's yesterday. It's like 4 years is like a day. I look at time now and it's just like my time frames are all messed up. You know what I mean? Because you've just been in the game so long. So, but that whole 1 year, 5 year, you just have that's a commitment aspect, right? That's managing expectations. That's committing to the long haul of this. There is no short haul, to success. My another favorite, the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary, right? So we all get that, but it's like you got to understand there's just work to be done, and here's my thing, Christopher. I love time compression.
Yes.
And you know where you get time compression? From coaches.
I was about I was just about to say, and maybe a good point to that is somebody, I forget, it was a couple of years ago. The analogy somebody gave was a coach can't take a 3 year window and just magically snap his or her fingers and say, okay, Richard, this took me 3 years and now I've completely understand it. It's now going to take you 3 minutes. But a coach should, and if a coach is not shortening your runway significantly in different areas, then that would be a time for you to look at a different coach. And I remember when I first hired my first, or maybe my second coach ever, that was one of the conversations we had. Is a gentleman was working for a larger coaching program, and I really had a good connection with him. And he was just going through the next 6 months. And I just remember vividly him saying that I'm not here to fix anything. I'm not here to magically create anything. I'm here to guide you through the systems that we have in place that have been successful for the last many years from clients of all different walks of life. And I'm going to shorten your runway. And depending upon how you follow the systems and how much effort you give and your attitude and your energy into it, you're going to determine how much shorter that is. And that's what I always try to tell people is I will give you with my standard system routines and habits, I will put together a plan for you to execute. But the question and the unknown for me is, are you going to be spending 20 to 30 minutes per day on our items? Or are you going to spend 2 or 3 days where you really invest an hour, hour and a half? Because that significantly impacts how long or short that runway is. So I'm glad you touched on that, because I think for anybody listening to this, whether you have a coach or not, or whether you're looking to be a coach, that's a really good guideline just to think about, is the idea of shortening somebody's runway or shortening somebody's time period of learning a new skill. And then the other interesting maybe perspective on this too is people say, well, should I hire a CFO or marketing person or a virtual assistant? And I always say, first of all, can you afford them? And then secondly, what activities would you want them to take off of your plate? And it comes down to a very black and white analogy saying like, okay, invoicing, these other things, it takes me a lot longer because it's not something that I'm really good at. So I think if I hired a bookkeeper or somebody that was going to do the accounting, even though I'm paying him or her 8 hours per week, that might literally be the equivalent of 16 hours for me. So it's not just investing your time, energy, and money, but it's, will this shorten my runway? And then secondly, will this take something or multiple things off of my plate so I can spend some of my time or my expertise somewhere else?
Yeah, that is what it's about. Remember, it's as simple as this. Anything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else.
Mm.
And vice versa, right? So that your example right there is that. Am I going to say yes to doing the accounting? Never. Okay. To me, that's a hard no for a lifetime. Okay. Never doing it, because that will never benefit my business if I'm doing it. Right. So I will make the allocation to hire that person because, like you said, it'll take them 4 hours. It would take me 16. Okay. And it'd be wrong. Okay. So it's like there's no winning in that for me. I understand my limitations, right? I lived through it. I lost everything because I was a goof, but whatever, you learn this stuff, and you're right. That's a transfer of not just expertise, right? You want an expert doing that. It's a transfer of risk, Okay. Just like when I buy insurance, I'm transferring risk, right? I'm taking the risk of, this financial setback because of this happened to that company. But now I'm buying time. Okay. I'm buying quality of life, not, there's standard of living, there's quality of living. I'm a big quality of living guy. Okay. I don't buy things. I don't need another boat. I don't need another this. I want more time. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I don't want to be chained to the business. Right. So I'm always looking for that exchange. So like you said, when you're calculating, well, what's it going to cost me? Yes, there's dollars and cents, but there's also this time factor that you have to, what is your time worth? It's the old adage like, well, should I cut my own grass? Well, how much am I worth an hour? Oh, I'm worth $275 an hour. I bet you can get your grass cut for less than that. Like have someone else do that, right? Like really understand your numbers and you have to pick and choose. Now I get it. Guys want to sit on a mower, drink a beer, and no one talks to them, and it's the best 2 hours of their day or their week. I get it. So if that works for you too, that's therapy. That's great. I love it. So you can put that underneath the therapy category, cut away. It's totally okay.
I got to interject for a second because two things that you said that really stood out to me in a good way. When I got one of my first speaking, coaching, and training certifications, it was through the first ever actually John C. Maxwell program, and I really do love a lot of John's stuff. But John shared a story from stage, and we had a small group. It was intimate. It was really cool, and he was talking about just that. He said when he first started, he was working with a coach, or he bought a program, and he remembers going, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing here big time, but going to his wife and basically saying, my time is more valuable, so I'm gonna, hire somebody to pay the mow the lawn, so then I could do all this other. And he had his whatever his minute or two, and he presented to her, and she said, John, first question I have is, with what money are you going to pay this landscaper or gardener? And that goes back to my point of when you project out, do you have the money? And then, obviously you have to have it, but then it's what will it take off? But you said something, and I just have to repeat it because it's actually coming on one of my solo episodes in the next week or two, is every time, and I coach and I speak about this from stage and something about the idea of multitasking, but every time you say yes to someone or something, you are factually 100% by default saying no to someone or something else. Now, I say that, and I have a couple of slides, and people kind of their eyes get open, and I say, no, I'm not saying, nor am I suggesting that you weigh every single decision. Like, do I want green grapes or do I want red grapes? And you spend 4 hours, contemplating that. But you can't be at your son's or daughter's game and interviewing a potential client. You can't be, having dinner with a friend and having dinner with, a significant other. So my point to that is, it's when you look at the best use of your time right now, there's the analogy of win, what's important now. I add the M to that, WMIN, is what's most important now. And it fits hand in hand with that idea. And it's something I use a lot with my clients is, is this really important to say yes? And the other thing to add is, just because you say no to something today, so it's, Friday when we're recording this, just because you ask me to lunch today, early this morning, and I say, hey, Richard, I can't, I have a podcast interview today, that doesn't mean we can't do lunch at some point next week, the week after. So I wanted to just mention that too, because a lot of times people say, well, what if, you miss out? And I said, you can't look at life that way, that this is the only time, because then you're going to be doing everything for anybody and everybody. But it's so important because you can't do 5 things at the same time. And if you do more than one, that you end up doing 1 or 2 of them really poorly.
Yeah, it's that tyranny of the urgent. I got to do it because I don't get a chance to talk to him. I can't do that. Listen, if that was life, dude, we'd all just be losers. Okay. You'd have no life, there'd be nothing. So, I love it. And that yes and no thing is really, really critical. I tell my kids, people are asking, I go, just because someone throws you the ball doesn't mean you got to catch it. Okay. You got to understand, this is the level of maturity though. It truly is, whether it's business, because whatever, it's that takes time to develop that. Again, it goes back to that self-confidence, really knowing who you are, what you deliver to the marketplace, to the world, to your family. Once you understand that, man, your decision, you get complete clarity on decision making, right? But if all that's kind of, it's not really in a priority, it's not in one, two, three, that kind of stuff, like you're gonna vacillate to whatever makes you feel good. That is not a way to make decisions. Okay. If you make, it's like it's the old, hey, don't make permanent decisions based on emotional positions, right? On temporary feelings. Like you can't, I tell my kids without tattoos, right? They want to get a tat and some of them have them. And I'm like, just think about it. Okay. Don't run out and get it. Now some of my kids have them. I don't know what the process was, but they got what they got and there it is. So hope you love it. Okay. So, but it's the exercise I want them to go through.
Yeah. And it goes back to what we said before is, if it's the right decision, I don't know many tattoo artists that say, hey, Richard, it's a sale today only. If you want that XYZ, you have 5 minutes to make it. But again, going back to being 17, 18, it's that frame of reference where, to your point, 4 years back then was literally where, like, I was not in high school and now I'm out of high school, where in our lives being, where we are, you look back at, 2 and 4 years and you're like, okay, like, that's a length of time, but it was not that long ago. So I love that.
Yeah, it's really good, Christopher. We've hit some amazing stuff. Okay. And as everyone knows, at least who listens to me, I'm not a planner. Okay. We don't plan these podcasts. So, and I don't know, you're like episode 131. I haven't failed yet. So I'm on a good trajectory. Things are good, man, but it's all because I got great guests like you, man. It really matters. And bringing this level, because I've never talked about this particular topic this way on my show. So I really appreciate it. And I'm just, again, super blessed to get the right guy to do it. Okay. So I love it, man. I think you just brought a real great element to this show today. And give us some final thoughts, your parting words, and of course, how do people get in touch with you, follow you, the whole drill?
Well, first off, want to just again reiterate that it's been a pleasure being here. As I said in the beginning, when I get to be on somebody's show, when they've been on my show, it's a fun experience. My parting words, very simple, is that I think the biggest gap is the decision versus the action gap. And I want to hit on this because it's something that's been very impactful to me. And I remember one of my coaches had a fable and a story he asked, and the gist of it was 4 frogs are sitting on a log. 3 frogs decide to jump off. How many are off? And I always, or how many are left? And I always answered it 1. He said, listen again, Chris. 4 frogs are on a log. 3 decide to jump off. How many are left? And I again answered, there's 1. He said, no. He said, a decision is not an action. He said, decisions are made in your mind. Actions are made with your words, your hands, your legs. And my point to that, to your listeners, is that there are so many things that we decide to do and not to do every single day. And in no way am I judging anybody, because I've clearly had my successes and my failures along the way. But what I am encouraging each of your listeners is just to take a couple minutes at some point today and think about some of those decisions that you've made in the past week or months, or maybe a couple decisions you've made many times without taking action one way or the other. And I encourage you to go through that exercise and then be intentional with what is important. Because if there is something, for example, a side business that you've been telling people about, but you haven't done anything about it in the last year or two, then maybe it's really not your side business now. It doesn't mean it might not be in the future, but if you're not acting on it, that means that there's a reason why. And I'm a big believer in things happen for different reasons at different times, but identify your decisions, then look, where's that gap between decisions and actions, and then take actions on those things that are really important. And those things that are not really important right now, put them on the back burner. It doesn't mean they're dead forever, but maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years. But it's a really easy exercise to do. And I do it a lot with myself. I don't do it as often as I'd like to, just because I'm working on some other things. But now that I said it out loud, I'm definitely going to do it today. And my website is noquitliving.com. I also always give out my personal email address, which is chris@noquitliving.com. I love connecting with new people. And then we're on social media. Everything is under No Quit Living. So I just want to again thank you for the time. Any of our listeners, if you want to jump onto the No Quit Living podcast, you can look back. I think your episode, I should have looked at and memorized it, but it was about a month ago. So I release guest episodes every Friday and solo episodes Monday through Thursday. So obviously, if you're listening to this, it's because you like Richard's content. So if you want to hear him with the chair reversed and the mic towards him, you can check that out. But again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, Christopher, thanks so much for being on again today. And it's just been just awesome. Great desire plus action, decisions plus action. Without the action, they're dreams, man. They're still on your pillow. So let's get them off the pillow. So beautiful. I love it. And for everyone else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Sharpen the Spear podcast. If today's episode helped you think sharper, act smarter, or see new profit potential, do me a favor. Share it with a fellow home service owner and leave a quick review. Ready to find the profit hiding in your business? Head to sharpenthespearcoaching.com and book your free profit discovery call today. And until next time, keep sharpening.